What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and as promised, we're gonna do a breakdown on the trailer, the new trailer for Spider-Man No Way Home, right? So the Easter eggs, everything you missed, all that kind of good stuff. Now, we have to address the elephant in the room, the big talking point that everybody is addressing, the Brazilian trailer. Now, for those of you guys who don't know what's going on with that, there was a Brazilian trailer that was released, and in the trailer that we saw here in the States, there's that point where like the lizard and all those guys go charging towards Spider-Man, and it's like a great big huge thing. But in the Brazilian trailer, that scene lasts about 2 or 3 seconds longer, and the lizard gets punched away by somebody that we don't see. Now, people have basically been analyzing it and breaking it down, and due to the fact that it seems to have kind of been edited poorly and in a rush, you can kind of see an arm there. And so the big thing that's going on is people are saying that's either Tobey Maguire or Andrew Garfield, but basically their presence in the trailer was removed, presumably by Marvel, in order for the actual trailer to be released without any major spoilers involving their characters. I say by Marvel because if you guys recall the rumors and the discussions that were going on recently, apparently Sony and Marvel were butting heads over whether or not Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield should appear in the trailer. Given what we saw in the trailer that came out last night, looks like Marvel won out, and based on the footage from the Brazilian trailer, it also looks like Marvel won out, but that small little edit seems to indicate that. Either that, or the lizard was hit by just a ridiculously strong gust of wind, and like his head just kind of got blown back. So it can only be one of those two things. But getting into the meat and potatoes of this trailer, I just want to reiterate the same thing that I said last night. Electro looks amazing. God, he looks so good. I always thought he looked kind of goofy and terrible in like the other Spider-Man movies, but in this one, he looks phenomenal. I absolutely love the way his character looks, man. It's how Electro should have looked the entire time. I think it's just, I'm not even gonna lie. I'm kind of more excited to see him than I am anybody else, right? I love Jamie Foxx. I'm a ridiculously huge Jamie Foxx fan, right? So having the chance to like actually see him as Electro the way that Maxwell Dillon is supposed to look, it's amazing. I always felt like he should have played Adam Brashear in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, either him or John David Washington, but that's neither here nor there. Let's get into our coverage here. So first things first, one of the big talking points here is what people noticed in the initial trailer when it came out, that the tentacles of Dr. Octopus had a kind of red coloring to it. And the coloring looked like Stark tech, right? Like the Iron Man suit, the Iron Spider suit. So the on-running theory here was that Dr. Octopus in his fight with Peter Parker, with Tom Holland, had basically absorbed the Iron Spider suit off of him and assimilated that nanotechnology into his own tentacles, and that's why they look the way they do. This trailer gives us a little more insight here, and I don't think that's fully what's happening. I think that's kind of what happened, but not to that same degree. Obviously, there is discoloration, there's a change in color, and in fact, in that scene in the trailer, in one of the first 3 opening shots, and then they show it again later on, when the camera is panning around Dr. Octopus and you see his tentacle arms, they're actually changing. And so if you fast forward or you look at that point where Dr. Octopus has Spider-Man captured and he says, "You're not Peter Parker," his tentacles have the same coloring, but Peter Parker is still wearing the Iron Spider suit. So what it looks like is in their initial conflict, their initial skirmish, maybe some of the suit was siphoned off of Peter Parker and absorbed by Dr. Octopus. Either that or he found some way to get his hands on Stark tech before the two of them fought. Something else that I noticed, and I'm sure all you guys noticed, is that Dr. Octopus, once he sees the face of Tom Holland, says like, "You're not Spider-Man." Obviously, that's him saying, "You're not Tobey Maguire," which is fine. That's obvious, that's on the nose. What I think is less obvious, and what I think is more important here, is the fact that it looks like he was yanked into the Marvel Cinematic Universe and doesn't know. He doesn't realize that he's in a wholly different universe now. Now, it could be one of those things where he is yanked into this new universe, and then he sees Spider-Man and believes that Spider-Man is yanked into that universe with him. So like he knows what's going on. And as soon as he unmasks, or as soon as Tom Holland unmasks himself, he realizes it's not Tobey Maguire. I'm inclined to believe it's the former, that he was yanked into the Marvel Cinematic Universe and doesn't know. The big problem with that is it has to have been done before the fight on the bridge. The only way that scenario could make sense, that he was yanked into the MCU mid-fight with Tobey Maguire, is that the fight between him and Tobey Maguire would have to basically be identical to the fight he was engaging in, or that he would be engaging in with Tom Holland's Spider-Man, right? So it's like walking through a barrier and nothing changes, everything's the exact same, right? The moves, the way Spider-Man's swinging, all that kind of stuff. It has to be perfectly identical. That's just ridiculous. There's no conceivable way that could be the case. So it looks to me like he was yanked into the Marvel Cinematic Universe before the fight between himself and Tom Holland. He didn't know he was in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and for whatever reason, a fight breaks out between the two of them. Now, one of the more obvious things that I think has a less obvious implication here is when Doctor Strange tells Peter Parker, when you botched the spell, we started getting all these visitors from across the multiverse. Now, I still stick by the idea that the events of Loki are what caused this, because if you look at the Loki TV show, right, if you look at that when Immortus basically said we crossed the threshold, this was verified as having been a reference to when Wanda became the Scarlet Witch. The reason why I bring that up is because this wouldn't be the first time that we see an event from Loki coincide with another event in the MCU. Remember, one of the things that was established in Loki is that space and time are synonymous. You can't have one without the other. And so the death of Immortus at the hands of Sylvie and the entire multiverse breaking free and flying into a state of disarray, it would make perfect sense that instead of the spell being screwed up by Peter Parker, it just happened to look that way because the spell Doctor Strange cast happened right at the same time when Immortus was killed and the multiverse broke free. The reason why I side with that is because Doctor Strange is the Sorcerer Supreme, right? I mean, this guy's dedication and knowledge of magic is unparalleled and unrivaled by anybody with the exception of Wanda, and even that's a little bit dubious. Agatha said she's destined to become more powerful than the Sorcerer Supreme. We don't know if she actually is. And so if Doctor Strange is really just that capable and that powerful and understands the significance of creating such a complex spell, I have a hard time believing that spell would be screwed up by a teenage kid who couldn't shut the hell up. I just don't see that being the case. I just don't see that being the case, right? It seems a little goofy to me. So I think it's more practical and more reasonable that the events of Loki are actually what sent the spell awry. Now, building on top of that, right, when Doctor Strange tells Peter Parker that after the spell's been botched, we got visitors from every universe, I think this is a very important thing, because while this does tell us how it is that we get Electro and Sandman and Dr. Octopus and Green Goblin and all those guys, I think what it also means is there are characters who exist in the Marvel Cinematic Universe that we haven't seen yet, right? That we're not going to see in this movie, or if we do, post-credit scenes, little cameos, different things along those lines. In more recent news, and this is a very important thing, in more recent news, one of the things that's come out is that it's been verified that Wolverine and Professor X will show up in Doctor Strange 2. Whether or not they're going to be in an alternate universe, we don't know. But it's entirely possible that while heroes like that probably wouldn't be captured by Doctor Strange and like forced back into their universe, although it's entirely possible that there are other villains who exist out there that we simply haven't seen yet that could have a future in the Marvel Cinematic Universe because they're just some of the people Doctor Strange has been capturing. If it really is people from every universe, that's an astronomical number of villains. And it just happens to be that these are the villains that we're focusing on in the Spider-Man film. I mean, I don't mean to go off on like a little bit of a tangent here, but this could explain the arrival of Galactus, right? That's what happened in the events of Age of Ultron in Marvel Comics, that you have Galactus in the main Marvel universe, then you have Galactus in the Ultimate Universe, who's basically just a series of robots, is really all it is, right? Nanobots. But when Wolverine screwed up time in the Age of Ultron storyline, like he broke time, Galactus was transported to the Ultimate Universe, where he basically met his robot counterpart, and the two of them actually merged. It was really, really cool. But there's precedent to be set for characters being yanked over. So do I think this is going to be like Spider-Man No Way Home officially introducing Galactus into the MCU? I don't think so. Galactus is hugely significant and way more significant than to be introduced in the MCU in some kind of a cameo or a post-credit scene. Honestly, I mean, it'd be cool to see, but I'd be kind of pissed off if that was the sort of treatment that he got, right? It'd be sort of disappointing to see that happen. Now, this also begs the question of the scene where Doctor Strange tells them that the villains are supposed to die in their universes fighting Spider-Man, right? It's their fate. And he says like, I'm sorry, kid. Peter says, I'm sorry too. And he seems to yank the box away from Doctor Strange. There's a couple ways to interpret this, right? The first is that if you look at the scene where Doctor Strange is saying like they're coming through, right? The portal's opening, then that whole location looks exactly like the location where the great big huge battle seems to take place, where that huge fight seems to take place. And because of the fact that Doctor Strange says that when it's at night and the fight takes place at night, it stands to reason that great big huge fight that we see between like Electro and Sandman and Lizard, that it all happens as that portal opens, right? Like literally the portal opens, they show up, a big fight breaks out, and that's it. There's a couple issues with this though. One, we don't see Green Goblin in that fight, and we don't see Doctor Strange in that fight. And if Doctor Strange was present when the portal was opened and all those villains are there, it would make sense that he would be a part of that fight. And so what this seems to indicate is that fight actually takes place later on in the movie. More so than that, the scene where Spider-Man takes the box away from Doctor Strange, that seems to happen near the end. That basically it looks like a a day's been saved kind of thing, and that Doctor Strange is getting ready to take all those villains, put them back into their universes, and basically doom them to their own deaths. And Peter Parker thinks it's unfair, right? They can be fixed or redeemed or whatever motivation makes sense to him, but he believes they can be saved. So he snatches the box, a fight ensues, which culminates in Doctor Strange pushing Peter Parker out of his own body, and then basically telling him this is just the way it has to be, right? Or something along those lines. We don't really know. Maybe Peter Parker frees the villains before Doctor Strange gets his hands on the box, and basically now those villains officially exist in the MCU. Jamie Foxx's Electro, Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin, Alfred Molina's Dr. Octopus, all that kind of stuff. They officially exist there, and now they're part of the MCU. That's what makes things kind of hectic though, is because there's a point in the trailer where Peter says, this is all my fault. I can't save everybody. So maybe that's kind of the aftermath, right? He realizes he can't save all the villains, and the villains have to go back to their universes and die. He could be saying it's all my fault because he really is the one who botched the spell, that Loki has nothing to do with it. Honestly, that single phrase, taken out of context, has no value whatsoever, and we can infer any number of different things from that. It could be that quite literally, Andrew Garfield dies, and that's what he's referencing, right? I can't save everyone. There's Andrew Garfield right there. His head's all cracked open and just bleeding out onto the street. I can't save everyone, MJ. And like, that's the end of it, right? I mean, it could be a reference to any number of things. Now, one of the big questions people have is the role Dr. Octopus plays in this movie. That he almost kind of looks like a good guy in this movie, and honestly, I think he does. I think he becomes a hero. I think that the story of his character at the end of Spider-Man 2, when he basically redeemed himself, right, and basically became a good guy, I think that continues on here. That I think he shows up here, and maybe he just kind of ends up in a fight with Spider-Man. Maybe it's them kind of reworking a little bit of that ending from Spider-Man 2, where basically like that ending never really happens. Instead, the fight kind of continues on, and instead of him being redeemed at the end of Spider-Man 2, he's redeemed here, right, and that's basically it. But regardless of the situation, I think Dr. Octopus ends up becoming a good guy. More so than that, I think Dr. Octopus is actually told by Doctor Strange, you're supposed to die in your fight against Tobey Maguire. And here's the reason why I say that. The scene where Tom Holland and MJ and all them are talking to like Dr. Octopus when they're like, what's your name? And he's like, Otto Octavius. And they start laughing at him because at the end of the day, it is kind of a silly name. So he deserves to be laughed at. The shirt that Peter is wearing in that scene looks like the exact same shirt he's wearing in a couple of other scenes. The first one is when Doctor Strange says they're supposed to die in their fight against Spider-Man. It's their fate. The second one is when he tells them like, go Scooby-Doo all that, right? Get the, go figure everything out. But more so than that, you also have the scene where Dr. Octopus says like, you're chasing ghosts. So I think that segment, while it does look like it's something that could be chopped up, that it doesn't really happen that way in the actual movie, that scene where Doctor Strange says like, they're supposed to die, and Otto Octavius says, you're chasing ghosts, I think that is actually a whole segment. I think that's an actual scene that does take place in that movie, that Otto Octavius knows he's supposed to die, right? There's a great big huge powwow. There's Doctor Strange, Dr. Octopus, Peter Parker, MJ, Ned Leeds' character, right? Genki, like all those guys, they're all together. And that's when you basically learn the truth of what's supposed to happen. You also have that scene when Electro tells Tom Holland, tells Peter, you're not gonna take this from me, right? It's his second chance, seemingly, his ability to live. Now, how it is that he would know if Dr. Octopus is essentially a good guy working alongside Peter, that's anybody's guess. I don't really know. And I'm just spitballing here on what Electro meant by that when he said, you're not going to take this from me. Also, as a quick little thing, I mean, I know that Ned Leeds is not the name of the actor, but I still say it's basically Genki from Spider-Man. I mean, it's a different name, but basically Genki. Go read Ultimate Spider-Man with Miles Morales and you'll know for a fact that that's basically who he is. Now, a couple other things, or a few other things that I want to address here, right? One of the bigger scenes in the movie, and really one of the big talking points, at least as far as the trailer goes, is the scene where MJ falls, right? We talked about that in our reaction last night, and it looks like the Marvel Cinematic Universe might Gwen Stacy the character of MJ, right? Those of you guys who don't know what that means, Gwen Stacy died, right? In the comics, the night Gwen Stacy died by Jerry Conway, that was the significant story that taught Peter Parker he couldn't be reckless, right? He has to be careful with how he handles people that are basically weaker than him, right? He can't just get carried away and just sort of be, be very devil-may-care in terms of how he acts. But the important thing is that's actually how Emma Stone's character died in the Andrew Garfield movie, right? The Andrew Garfield Spider-Man. Gwen Stacy died almost exactly the way she died in the comics, right? Where he basically saved her at the last possible moment, and ultimately her head hit the ground, and it essentially killed her, right? Like she basically ended up dying. And so what a lot of people are saying is that because Emma Stone or because Gwen Stacy died in Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man movie, that's not Tom Holland who saves MJ. That is actually Andrew Garfield. And I'll be honest, man, that would be a great scene, right? Like imagine this scene, for example, right, where you've got MJ who's there and you've basically got Tom Holland facing off against all these different guys as best he possibly can. He's being totally overwhelmed and MJ gets knocked off and he goes, like he literally jumps off just like you saw in the trailer and he's going to rescue her, and then like the Green Goblin or somebody flies in and just like literally just starts attacking him, right? So like MJ's just falling to her death and then Andrew Garfield saves her life, right? This would make perfect sense, especially considering the leaks and things that we've heard, the leaks and the rumors, because one of the things that the leaks are basically saying is that most of the fight scenes regarding what you could call the Sinister Six basically take place between Tom Holland and them, and that's basically it. But Doctor Strange goes to the universes where these various villains come from to grab their Spider-Man, essentially Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield, and bring them into the MCU. And so that scene where MJ's falling to her death and like a Spider-Man saves her, that's when they officially arrive on the scene, right? Like basically Andrew Garfield saves her, and then like you got Tom Holland standing there with Doctor Strange, and then basically Spider-Man's got backup. It sounds like something they would do, right? Imagine it like the alternate reality Spider-Man appearing in like the same kind of feeling and tone when Captain America got Thor's hammer in Avengers Endgame. You know what I mean? Just like, damn, like you kind of knew it was coming, right? Instead of Captain America reaching down to grab the hammer, it's MJ falling to her death. And like when you see Captain America's hand grabbing the hammer, it's Andrew Garfield grabbing her hand. And then like when you see like the hammer fly and it hits Thanos in the back of the head, that's basically MJ being saved. And then like when it comes back and then like Captain America catches it, that's the reveal of Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield, that kind of a thing, right? That sounds like something the MCU would do. God, it gives me chills just thinking about it. But it would be cool. It'd be an amazing reveal. And the reason why is because as cool as the appearances of Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield would be, it can only happen under a couple of different circumstances. Either they appear in the movie at the very, very beginning when you see these villains just kind of disappearing, right? Just vanishing, being snatched into the MCU because a spell went awry while they're fighting those Spider-Man. I think that's the least likely scenario, that you have it at the very, very end when basically they're returned to their universes and it's just kind of a digital or a movie equivalent of letting our voices trail off as they get into the fight with their Spider-Man, and we as the viewer know they're going to die fighting those Spider-Man, and that's it, right? Like that's when you see them. I also think that's less likely. I think Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield appearing in this movie will happen in like the third act, right? I don't think they're gonna be there for most of the movie. I don't think there's gonna be any huge amount of time they're there. I think they're going to appear when Doctor Strange realizes there's no way for Tom Holland to win on his own, and he's gotta worry about the other villains who have escaped, who are in their universe from other realities. He can't focus on these Sinister Six guys. He's got much bigger fish to fry. And so I think he goes and he grabs Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield. They go help Tom Holland while Doctor Strange goes and does his thing. And that's how you see the characters in the movie essentially showing up at the final fight when Tom Holland needs backup the most. Now, this also leads to the appearance of the black suit, and this is something that a lot of people are talking about. If I'm being honest with you guys, I think this is kind of a reference to the events of Superior Spider-Man. Not in the sense that like Dr. Octopus takes over the body of Peter Parker and becomes like a better Spider-Man, but in the sense that like that suit is actually designed by Dr. Octopus that allows Peter Parker to use magical energy, basically energy given to him by Doctor Strange. But we can interpret this a couple different ways. You do see Peter Parker swinging through what looks like a great big huge park. There's a lot of electrical lines, power lines, and then you see a scene where Electro forms behind him. So that may very well just be a scene where Peter Parker is just swinging through, either trying to get to Electro or trying to escape Electro or get to like the location of where he's supposed to find him, and Electro is appearing behind Peter. Peter just doesn't know he's there. And if that is a suit that's built by Dr. Octopus and Dr. Octopus is a good guy, then this is very Sinister Six. And the reason why is because during the original Sinister Six story, Peter Parker fought each member of the team in a location that was the most conducive for them. So he fought Electro in a power plant, different things along those lines. And so it would make perfect sense that if Dr. Octopus is the one helping Peter, that ultimately he's building suits, things Peter can use that will help him face off against these various guys who are out there, right? And the reason why is because if you look at the black suit, it's got wires and different things like that. So it looks like it's designed to basically channel, absorb, and redirect electrical energy, which is the exact kind of suit he would need if he was going to face off against someone like Electro. One of the popular theories that people have is that Tom Hardy, because he's now in the MCU, maybe he stumbles across Peter Parker and Peter Parker gets the Venom symbiote. As cool as that would be, that's just too much, because you have to establish why the Venom symbiote would bond itself to Peter Parker. You have to establish a whole bunch of different things, right? Like that in and of itself is like a 15-minute long segment, and this movie is already packed to the gills just from what we can see in the trailer. I'm not saying Tom Hardy Venom will not appear. I'm not saying that's not the case. It's just, for me, I have a hard time believing that would be the case. And I think it's more practical that the black suit Peter is wearing is a suit that was basically designed for him by Dr. Octopus. Now, the other question to ask here is that if in the comics, Dr. Octopus is the one who leads the Sinister Six, but in this movie, he seems to be working with Peter to defeat what is in effect the Sinister Six, then who's leading the team now? And I think it's the Green Goblin. I think that it's Norman Osborn who's basically leading this Sinister Six-esque team. It explains a few things. The first thing it explains is why it is that you don't see him in that giant battle with Electro and Sandman and the Lizard, that he's actually watching it happen. He's out there somewhere. Now, it could also be that in that scene, because of the fact that it was basically edited, that what you have is Tom Holland and you've got Andrew Garfield facing off against those guys, and then you've got Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin facing off against Tobey Maguire, because Tobey Maguire knows how to handle him. So Green Goblin's there, we just don't see him in that particular scene. But this also begs the question, do we have two Green Goblins? Do we basically have the version that we're the most familiar with the helmet on his face, and then the one that we see where he's basically zooming in from the sky with some pumpkin bombs by him and like missiles flying out of him, and that's basically it? I think the answer to that question is yes. That I think what you have there is Willem Dafoe Green Goblin and James Franco Green Goblin, Norman and Harry Osborn, father and son. I think that's why they look different, because Willem Dafoe, this guy's got blonde hair, but when you see that scene where you have that Green Goblin that's like racing in, it looks like he has dark hair. James Franco had dark hair. So I feel like if they keep any semblance of the characters intact, it could be Willem Dafoe, because if I recall, he had dark hair in the original Spider-Man movie, so it could very well be him. But at the end of the day, I have no idea. I'm guessing here. That's probably more fan wish fulfillment than anything else. There's no real evidence to support that claim, but I still think it would be cool. Regardless, these are some of the things, or really the cooler things that I noticed in the trailer, and we'll do future videos based on more stuff that we've seen, more observations as people dig them up, as we dig them up, and of course, as always, we'll make sure we give credit where credit's due. But if you guys enjoyed this video, let us know down in the comment section. Thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace.